Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV WORLD. In today's show, we will be taking a look at the political situation of the country when we know that the National Assembly has elected Shehbaz Sharif as the 23rd Prime Minister of Pakistan with 174 votes amid a boycott by the PTI. This has happened today in the National Assembly, that the new election of the Prime Minister has been carried out after the previous Prime Minister was ousted by a no-confidence motion in the National Assembly on the 9th of April. We also understand that this is something that is important with regards to the progress of the country and the democratic process. And we also understand that there are many challenges that the new government has inherited, something which was also part of the Prime Minister's speech in the House today, where he spoke about the various issues that are needed for Pakistan to move towards the path of progress and prosperity. There are many challenges, most of them that we've discussed repeatedly on our shows also, but we'll also take a closer look at what the Prime Minister spoke about with regards to the need for unity in terms of dealing with all the different challenges, both on the domestic front and also on the international front as well. He also talked about the economic situation of the country and the dire need for a charter of economy. There are many other measures that the Prime Minister also announced in his speech in the House today, where he spoke about a 10% increase in the pension of civil and military personnel. He also talked about lowering of prices of wheat flour. He also spoke about increasing the minimum wage to rupees 25,000 with effect from the 1st of April, and said that there is going to be a national cause through consensus, and that is what is needed at this moment. Talking about the different foreign policy issues, he also highlighted the fact that there is need for rapprochement over disagreement, and that he wants to be able to engage with different countries, including India as well, with regards to the Kashmir issue. He spoke about how both sides need to realize that there's so many issues that are confronting both the nations, and that it is better to come and resolve the issue of Kashmir on multiple fora as well. We're going to be taking a deeper look at this speech as well, and with regards to the new government strategy as to how to deal with challenges on the local and international front as well in our show today. For this and more, we've been joined in the studios, of course, by Farrukh, Pitafi and Raja Faisal, as always. And we've also been joined online by Dr. Niaz Murtaza, who's a political analyst. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz, for being with us in the show today. I'll start with you, Dr. Niaz. When we look at what the new Prime Minister has spoken about, he, of course, has highlighted the many challenges which are quite apparent that are present for the new government to deal with. And none of those challenges are very small. The economic front, of course, is a big challenge for the government to resolve, plus the foreign policy issues are also quite huge. But I also want to start off talking about the foreign conspiracy with regards to what the Prime Minister said. It's important that the public actually knows what the truth is, and that he is going to be calling for an in-camera session of the Parliamentary Committee, including the military leadership as well, with the Foreign Secretary and the Ambassador in question as well, so that the truth comes out. And he also said that even if there is an iota of truth with regards to a foreign conspiracy, he will go home. What do you see this development in terms of how important it is for the country to understand, and the kind of impact it's going to have on the political scenario of the country?
Really fix the situation because, PTI plans to make that as its main election plan.
Right.
And I guess that's understandable because it doesn't have a very strong record. It can't go to the people and say that we did this and we did that. That thing is very weak. So the only fallback plan for them is to, come up with this, weird conspiracy that there was some sort of, foreign plan to, topple the government. And but the thing is that it has a very strong social media, and it has this whole battery of people who speak so convincingly that a lot of naive people do fall for these kind of lies. I personally don't even have 1% believe that what they are saying is true. But since they may be able to mislead a lot of people, I think it's important to get to the bottom of this. And let's just remember this, that PTI has a habit of creating national political crisis based on complete lies. This is what they did in 2014 based on the bogey of, election rigging. And then, they made, the nation go through 4 months of agitation. And then in the end, the Supreme Court had to, appoint a commission. The government requested it, and, the judges had to waste their time on that petition. And in the end, what they found was there wasn't an iota of proof that there was any rigging. Now, the same thing is going to happen. There'll be a judicial commission that will waste time, and in the end, it will be found that there is nothing. So I think it's very kind of Shehbaz Sharif to, offer to resign. But then I don't think it should be a one-way kind of thing. What he should demand is that he's ready to resign if a conspiracy is found, but at the same time, then Mr. Imran Khan should be willing to quit politics if the commission finds that there was no truth in the conspiracy theory that they came up with, and on that basis they took that huge
Right. Dr.
unconstitutional.
Niaz, earlier Shehbaz Sharif also spoke about, with reference to nobody being dragged to courts and revenge not being sought. In case there is no conspiracy and it's proven that there is nothing of the sort out there, how are we going to move forward with regards to the former Prime Minister and PTI?
Well, I mean, otherwise, there's no way of, sort of convicting him or even prosecuting him for, bringing up this conspiracy theory. At most, what may happen is that, well, the opposition is talking about Article 6. I don't believe in that. Article 6 is when, you completely abrogate, suspend, pause the functioning of the Constitution. And I don't think, even though it was a huge constitutional illegality of what PTI did, I still don't think it, amounts to Article 6 stuff. Then the other thing is that, you can probably prosecute them for breaking their oath to uphold the Constitution, and they did not uphold the Constitution.
Right.
They blatantly broke that. So that is the other choice I would suggest that should be looked into, because,
Right.
what the PTI did was really unpardonable to, bring the country to the edge of, a huge crisis,
Right.
an endless
Right,
pit,
Doctor.
which was.
Absolutely, Dr. Niaz Mirza. Today was a very instructive day because Islamabad High Court actually threw out a case demanding that such a case be lodged against the former Prime Minister of treason. But regardless, there's another very important question regarding this Parliament. We know that PTI has decided to resign from the National Assembly, and we also know that they are agitating on the streets as well. How do you see all of this actually working out for the new government in coming days?
Well, obviously, it's a very weak government. He got about 174 votes. You need 172, so that's a margin of just two. Of course, there's, this bench strength consisting of, the dissidents, but it's not easy to use them on every issue. And then, it's a coalition government. It consists of parties that haven't, really gotten along in the past, which have mutual suspicions, very different outlooks. So, it goes from, a left of center parties like PPP, and then a few centrist parties, and then, the religious parties, the nationalist parties. So there is that. Then there is the fact that, the economic situation is so bad. Right now, the PTI has left the economy in a worse shape than what PMLN left for PTI. PMLN also left, the economy in shambles, but this is almost as bad. Now, of course, in PTI's defense, you could say that it had to, deal with COVID-19, which PMLN did, but the situation is precarious. And then, there is the fact that, the security situation is deteriorating, terrorism is increasing, then, the global situation is very volatile because of Ukraine. Our own external ties have been badly damaged. So there's a lot of challenges. Some of them, I think they can deal more easily with, making up on the external ties, USA, UK, European Union, even China and Saudi Arabia to some extent. The ties are not as good as they were earlier. So that may be the easier part. Politically, I think they can take steps towards, political reconciliation, improving the freedom of speech, media freedom, etc. These will be the easier part. But the biggest challenge will be economic. I mean, there's no easy solutions. I know Mr. Shehbaz Sharif has announced some relief for, the low-income people, but, the way inflation is going to, rear up its head. So what I think they need to do is quickly is to, get a deal done with the IMF, and that will be tied to our external ties. If our external ties improve with countries like European Union and USA, we may be able to get a sweeter deal maybe even on FATF. So
Yeah.
that could be used to, create some space so that, the misery for the common people is not as bad as it would
And if
otherwise
that can
be.
be
Dr.
done,
Niaz,
if that can be done, it will be
yeah.
miracles already. Please go ahead.
Dr. Niaz, as a political analyst, are you seeing a political crisis in coming days? Obviously, being the fact, as Farrukh has earlier mentioned, that PTI has resigned, but there is a sort of obviously two parties still there in the opposition benches, GDA and of course PMLQ. So they will be there, but of course, things would not be as simple as they are looking at right now. As an analyst, do you think that things would be moving towards early election? I mean, we know that election would be taking place sooner, but do you see that it would be happening earlier than it is being expected?
Well, if you ask my personal opinion, I mean, Farrukh knows, that I have opposed PTI
Yeah.
vehemently
Through
on
and through. Yeah.
all its policies. But this is one point that I actually agree with PTI, that this kind of assembly with such a thin majority, such huge issues. What we really need is, a strong government with a fresh mandate. So I would personally like to see, fresh elections as soon as possible. Now, of course, the issue is that, the Election Commission of Pakistan says that it's not possible to hold elections within 3 months, and for understandable reasons. And it's less because of, Election Commission of Pakistan's fault, but a lot of it has to do with that decisions that PTI took. So, example, there are two vacancies that were not filled because of PTI's foot dragging and refusal to, engage with the opposition. Then it said that, we will not do delimitation
Right.
until we have
Dr.
a
Niaz,
new
Dr. Niaz, we'll continue the discussion. Let me also welcome in the debate Mr. Nisar Ahmed Chima, who's an MNA of the PMLN. Thank you very much, Mr. Nisar, for joining us in the debate. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right. When we talk about, of course, what has happened today, this is a big day for PMLN as well and the former opposition with regards to Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif being voted in. But there's a lot that we need to also look at in terms of the challenges that the new government has inherited. Many of them have been pointed out by the Prime Minister himself in the speech. But as we were discussing earlier, the economic challenges are huge, and there's a lot that needs to be done on that front. We've seen a couple of measures that have been announced by the PM today, but what other strategies are in place? There has been talk previously with regards to a charter of economy. Is that something that we're going to be seeing soon?
Actually, today is the day of rule of law. It's the day of the victory of democracy. It's the way of the day of the victory of the implementation of the real spirit of Constitution. The real imported in real terms, the imported Prime Minister was Imran Khan, who has been ousted through a democratic and constitutional way, through the vote of no confidence, and which the majority of the House declared very clearly that we don't have any trust and confidence in this person. So he should have demonstrated at least the sportsman spirit when he lost the confidence of the majority of the House. He should have at least shown the sportsman spirit and resigned. But unfortunately, he failed to do that.
Right.
Today,
Mr. Chima,
the nation has chosen, the nation through its representatives, the elected representatives, has chosen new Prime Minister, who has demonstrated his political will, determination, and his abilities, his capacity.
Right, Mr. Chima,
to deliver. In the past,
an important aspect of Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's speech today was also that there is a need for a united front against all of the challenges that confront Pakistan, something that was spoken about earlier as well. And we understand that this entire government has also come in place based on the fact that the former opposition got together. But of course, now that we are moving forward, there is a lot at stake. How will the different parties and the new government actually be able to take all of the stakeholders together with a united stance?
All the parties which are part of united opposition, they have come together for some common goals, common objectives, and the common objectives are to ensure the rule of law in the country, supremacy of constitution in the country, to control inflation, to control unemployment, and to deliver at least to provide relief to the people, to common man. Today, I mean, he made a big announcement, a great announcement for the poor people, for the employees of the country. He increased their salaries by 10% and increased the pension as well by 10%. Which is,
right,
of course,
Dr. Chima, while your party seemed to be, Dr. Chima, while your party seemed to be ready to hit the ground running, and today we saw the Prime Minister-elect's speech, let me ask you, there's one lacuna that shows that somehow you were not planning for the entire gambit. I'm actually, asking about the speaker. Yesterday, speaker's post was also empty, but today you didn't hold any elections for replacement. That's why when Bilawal Bhutto Zardari was about to speak, the former the deputy speaker came in and cut the entire session short. Why is it that your party still doesn't seem to be planning for the whole thing, sir?
I couldn't understand. Could you please repeat your question?
Right. Regarding the speaker's post, sir, yesterday the speaker stepped down. So there is a post empty. And you could have actually elected somebody. We hear that Naveed Qamar Saab perhaps is going to be the next speaker. But whosoever is, you could have elected that person and that person could have then conducted the election today. But that didn't happen. Can you tell us why?
If the session is presided over by the deputy speaker, if the session is presided over by any person who is included in the panel of chairmen, it's totally legal and constitutional.
No, I understand that. But you could have filled the vacancy as well, right?
No, when the stage comes, we will fill. Definitely we will fill. No problem.
Right.
Chima Sahab, I wanted to ask about, obviously the previous government's policy over India was that they will not be talking to India unless the abrogation of 370 and 35A is reversed by India. But of course today, Prime Minister-elect Shehbaz Sharif, he has talked about his point of view. I just want you to, elaborate it further. Will we be seeing the coming Prime Minister of Pakistan, having a sort of dialogue with India over Kashmir?
Well, as the Prime Minister said, we would like to have friendly relations with all our neighbors, including India. But of course, to have friendly and pleasant relations which are sustainable require the peaceful and a resolution which was passed by the international community in the form of UN Security Council resolutions. I mean, these resolutions have to be implemented to resolve the issue of Kashmir on merit. And these are the wishes, the aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, which have been embodied in the UN Security Council resolutions.
And so abrogation of 370 and 35A is not a hindrance anymore?
Of course, it's a great hindrance. But of course, to have friendly and peaceful and pleasant relations with India, I mean, the greatest hindrance, obstacle is the issue of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir.
Exactly.
And the people, unless the people of Jammu and Kashmir are given the right of self-determination to decide their own fate, I mean, how can you expect friendly relations with India?
All right, Chima Sahab, with regards to our relations with the United States as well is something that the Prime Minister-elect mentioned, and this is important because, of course, there has been a lot of talk with regards to a conspiracy in which the United States has been involved, allegedly, and this, of course, has been refuted by Washington as well. But when we move forward, of course, there are relations between both the countries that have been tainted. Moving forward, how are we going to proceed with warming up those relations? What is going to be the strategy of the government moving forward? I understand there's an in-camera session which is expected to happen with regards to the conspiracy, putting out the truth and making it clear what's going on. Is that going to have an impact on the relationship as well?
Well, it goes without saying that we want to have very good relations with all the superpowers, including United States of America. But of course, we want to have pleasant and friendly relations on equal basis. America is a superpower at the moment, and we would like to have very good relations and sustainable relations, sustainable and the ties, bonds, and which have been very useful for both the countries.
Right, so this in no way is going to... This is going to in no way affect the foreign policy of Pakistan. It will still be proactive or independent.
Well, I mean, the foreign policy under the premiership of Mia Shahbaz Sharif will be independent and based on the friendly relations. Doesn't mean that we would at any cost we will be accepting any dictation from any foreign policy, any foreign country, any superpower. No, not at all. We would have to to accept that yes, America is superpower, but we would like to have friendly relations on equal basis.
Right. Chima Sahab, with regards to, of course, the elections, there is also the expectation that we'll be seeing elections pretty soon. We've seen earlier statements from the Election Commission that it cannot happen before October, perhaps. How soon can we expect the new government to be calling in for elections?
Pardon? Hello?
Yes, Chima Sahab, with regards to elections in Pakistan, how soon can we expect the new government to call for elections?
Well, at the moment, the Election Commission of Pakistan has shown their inability to hold elections immediately, and as they have openly said that they will be able to hold elections after 6, 7, 8 months at least.
Chima Sahab, another question, and that is about obviously whatever is going on in Ukraine right now. We know that the previous government had a stance and it abstained from voting against Russia in United Nations. Would we be seeing the current and the upcoming government, taking a different stance in that context?
On this very issue, the new Prime Minister of Pakistan and the Foreign Minister, whosoever he may be, he will decide. And of course, it will require consultation at length.
Right.
All right.
I think Faisal was not listening to the army chief's speech when he actually elaborated Pakistan's stated policy, right?
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nisar Chima Sahab, for being with us and joining us in the debate and talking to us at length about what is going to be the future course of action. Farrukh, you also heard what the Prime Minister-elect said at the House. And of course, this is his first speech since he has been elected. But when we look at the different scenarios that are currently existing in the country, especially on the economic front and the foreign policy front as well, what do you make of the speech in terms of how we can see the future course of action or strategies taken by the government?
Right, and that is a very interesting question because we see a very interesting transition taking place. Remember, the previous Prime Minister Imran Khan was least experienced administratively when he came to power. He had not held any public office before this, right? And this perhaps is one of the most tried and experienced administrator, although it took him quite a lot of time, 2-3 decades to make it from CM Punjab to PM Pakistan. But he has actually taken over. Today in his speech, which was very cleverly crafted, especially regarding the relief of the people, he indicated 2 or 3 very important things. I think at this moment, as pointed out by Dr. Saab earlier as well, there is financial inflationary pressure on the common people, and I think that minimum wage and particularly the increase in pensioners' salary was a master stroke. I don't know how it is going to play out in coming days, whether we have the kind of monies or we don't, but if we do, that will be great news, right? On one side, that is true, and we still have to wait because there's still half an hour before he takes oath of office, and then we see the cabinet as well. But we have heard that the cabinet is going to be interesting as well. It is going to feature 12 MNAs or 12 ministers from PMLN, 7 from People's Party, 4 from JUIF, 2 from MKM, and 1 each from JWP, and other smaller parties which have BAP and others but that have supported. So that is going to be quite an interesting cabinet, and we have heard that Bilawal Bhutto Zardari maybe is going to become the foreign minister. If that happens, it will be something like his grandfather, because his grandfather first assumes also the role of foreign minister in Ayub Khan's cabinet, and then we see what exactly happens. But at this moment, the kind of speech that we heard was very smartly crafted, and it was a good message, but we still have to see talking is one thing, walking the talk is a different thing.
Absolutely. Dr. Niaz, another thing that the Prime Minister-elect mentioned is that no one was a traitor before and no one is a traitor now. And understandably, perhaps things are going to be clearer after the in-camera session that has been spoken about. But we understand that this, of course, is an important part of the narrative that PTI is playing currently at the moment. How is this going to actually play out in the eyes of the public? Because irrespective of whatever the in-camera session actually brings out, this is a sort of stain that perhaps would be difficult to wash in public.
And do you think that in the past few weeks, opposition that is going to take over the country now did a poor job of defending itself when it came to this issue?
Well, of course, PTI will try to, rub this issue as much as possible. And of course, they have a very strong social media communication team. All that is true. But then there is also the fact that, there is so little evidence to back up their claims, and it's probably very easy to refute it. Then, the challenge will be that, the government will also have to develop a very clear communication and social media strategy around it so that, it can match PTI on the social media, because, that's where, the opinions get shaped. So that will be the challenge. Of course, PMLN doesn't have the same kind of, social media team, and they will really have to, get their act together on that. But, the bigger challenge for the government is the fact that the longer it stays in power, and if this economic situation keeps deteriorating, more and more, the blame for the bad economic situation will shift from PTI to the government. And, if they stay in power for, say, 6 months, a lot of the blame will shift from PTI to the government. So this is, the real big risk that they have to look into. And I think it's in their own interest to try to, go for fresh elections as soon as possible. And if they win elections, come up with a strong mandate and then start tackling, the huge problems that Pakistan faces. Now, external relations may help a bit, we may get a better IMF deal, but there are still limits to how much, you can improve the economic situation, and it all is tied with the global situation. If the global economic situation deteriorates further, then the challenge will become bigger and bigger. So I hope they have a very clear plan in their mind, and they develop that further and take steps to implement it. So,
Dr. Niaz, we saw today that Prime Minister-elect, he categorically mentioned Pakistan's relations with Turkey, Pakistan's relations with China and Saudi Arabia, and he categorically highlighted CPAC, and he said that the previous government, of course, there were hindrances when it comes to implementations on CPAC, and he talked about it that he would be willing to rapid the CPAC progress. Do you think that the incoming days CPAC would be, hypened up, or CPAC could be, accelerated?
Well, it could be because, the pace of implementation had really fallen under PTI. If you just look at, the foreign direct investment coming from China in the 3 years under PMLN versus the 3 years under PTI, there is a big difference. Similarly with loans. But then there is the fact that, you are moving to, the next phase of CPAC, which is a bit more complicated in terms of, setting up all these economic zones. And that's really, the heart of CPAC, the roads, the power plants, etc. Those were just the start, because they don't really give you much economic payoff in terms of expanding manufacturing, expanding exports. So it's a more sophisticated kind of work that needs to be done, and that was part of the reason that PTI also struggled. So that will be the big challenge. PMLN's strength is, of course, infrastructure, building roads, building power plants, but it has shown less expertise in, making exports jump up. So to
Dr.
be fair
Niaz,
to
could the
Dr.
COVID
Saab, earlier you
could the-
were talking about another economic matter. Let me take you back to that. You said that there is a chance that we may get out of FATF. Can you elaborate on that point as well?
Well, not immediately. I think the next meetings are in June, but it's quite possible that we will get a more favorable hearing now if relationships between USA and European Union and Pakistan are better. So that's quite possible. But the big thing will need to come from expanding the manufacturing sector and getting exports up and running. And the truth is that PMLN's performance on export is quite poor. If you look at the three parties, PPP's performance is the best, number two is PTI, and PMLN's is last. Export growth was almost zero. So they will have to focus on that, and hopefully they'll bring a more astute economic team now. They have some good people. Mr. Miftah Ismail is good. A couple
But
of
he is
other
not a
people.
parliamentarian.
Sorry?
Miftah Ismail is not a parliamentarian as we speak.
Then, they'll have to find a way to get him into the Senate, as happened with Mr. Tareen. But let's see who they choose. With Mr. Dar, there is risks, because his policies were not very good, and he's developed a very bad reputation nationally. And to bring him back would put a lot of doubts in the minds, not just of PTI supporters, but also industry and so on. So I would encourage them to go in with a new team, and people like Mr. Miftah Ismail or somebody else who can do a better job on industrialization and exports, because that's the way forward now. So
Dr. Niaz,
economically, I mean, it's all going to take time, 2 or 3 years to, really stabilize the situation. You
Right.
can't do it
Dr. Niaz,
overnight.
Dr. Niaz, you earlier highlighted about the narrative build up by obviously PTI as a party, because they have a strong social media team. And I just wanted to know, wouldn't it be quite tricky situation, because we already know that on social media they are highlighting about that Lettergate, that if Imran Khan is removed, the things suddenly would get better. So if FATF is from grey to green, and if we get economy back on track, everything goes smooth. Still, they will be highlighting it. See, we have been mentioning that if things would get better, that would mean that, oh, they just wanted to get Imran Khan out.
So, the just to actually get to the gist of the question, shouldn't they be actually destroying their economy just to prove PTI wrong?
Well, that is the trick. But I think there should be a clear strategy, so long as they can demonstrate the benefits of improved ties with the West without a cost. Then I don't think there is a problem. For example, somebody had raised a question about, Ukraine, how will they vote? The question was, placed to the MNA from PMLN. Now the thing is, in principle, of course, Pakistan should vote in favor of Ukraine. But if it does that, you can imagine the backlash from PTI.
Exactly.
See, we were not doing it, and they have really gone on their knees and so on. So they have to be very careful that they are able to demonstrate the benefits that will come from improved ties without PTI being able to demonstrate that they are going on their knees and so on.
All
But,
right, Dr. Niaz, another important aspect currently, of course, in the international arena is the issue of Afghanistan as well. And we understand that previously Pakistan had an important role to play with regards to peace in Afghanistan. And since the Taliban regime has come into power, Pakistan has been advocating Afghanistan's stance as well and interacting with the Taliban regime as well. With the change in leadership in Pakistan, how do you think it's going to impact our relationship relationship with the Taliban regime? Because, of course, the previous leadership had their own stance with regards to the Taliban regime and their own relationship with the Taliban regime as well. Will that affect the way Pakistan deals with this issue?
Well, I mean, the first issue is, all these foreign and security issues. The question in Pakistan also always arises as to who really decides them. So that will be the thing. If, it's permanent institutions, then obviously there may not be a big change. But again, I personally feel that there needs to be a big change in our Afghan policy. We should support the Afghan people. And, the Prime Minister very rightly said that, the Afghan people are suffering. But then, there is the issue of, support to the Taliban regime, which we have been doing quite loudly recently. And it's because of, the ideological bent of Imran Khan. I think that needs to change. But then again, you have to tread it very carefully and do it in a very nice way. Otherwise, PTI will bounce back again. But definitely
Dr.
there
Saab,
needs
do you
to be.
think that Pakistan, regarding Taliban, Pakistan has the kind of leverage? Because we have just seen only day before yesterday and yesterday, Russia established diplomatic ties with Taliban. So now somebody else also has the kind of control or leeway with them that we might have had in the past.
Well, that makes it even more ticklish that, if Russia has recognized them, now we become the next one, then obviously, then, that might affect our ties with with the West. So we have to tread very carefully. I think we should go by what the regional consensus is, which means China and the other neighbors of Azerbaijan, and also coordinate closely with Western countries on that. Obviously, there are so many issues with the way Taliban are governing Afghanistan, the crackdown on media, on opposition, the women's rights, etc. I don't think they deserve recognition at this stage, and I don't think Pakistan should take that. So, these are all very tricky issues that have to be handled very, very subtly, because with each situation there are pros and cons, pluses and minuses. So all these will, add to the challenges that this very weak government will face. So it's not going to be a very, comfortable seat. And then, with PTI on the streets. So, the new government has its act together, and that's why I feel that, sooner they go to the elections, the better it will
Right.
be.
Dr. Niaz, another important aspect is, of course, the issue of Islamophobia as well. And the former Prime Minister did emerge as a champion of Islamophobia. And perhaps with regards to the OIC as well, this was an important issue that brought the countries together. How is the new government going to be able to take that seat and proceed it forward? And what is going to be the OIC stance on it?
Well, I think we did get a victory of sort where, the UN declared, a day against Islamophobia. So I don't think, there is any harm in, going ahead with that without, the sort of firebrand way that, Mr. Imran Khan was doing, or, some other parties in Pakistan like TLP would want in terms of, throwing out the French ambassador and so on. I think the focus should be on, work at the UN so that there are some protocols, etc. develop. And then I don't think there is anything wrong with that, pushing that further.
All right. With regards to whatever the PTI government has achieved, we understand that whenever there is a new government, there is a lot that is criticized as to what the previous government has done, and perhaps fairly so. But will there be certain measures taken by the PTI that the new government should be continuing?
And should I add to it, with your permission? Sir, regarding another very crucial, announcement today by the Prime Minister-elect, was about BISP and bringing it back, the card particularly. We know that since PMLN left, the BISP project actually expanded and became SARS, and it had more than one component, not only BISP, but 39 other components as well. Do you think that that will be at the cost of the former 40, departments project, or all is going to continue?
Well, I think there were some, good initiatives started by PTI. The ideas were good, but of course, what you have to see is, how they were implemented and what was the impact. There's no neutral third-party evaluation so far. But there is the fact that it started as BISP, and then the PTI government changed its name. So I don't think there's any harm in going back to the original name. But then I think where credit is due to the PTI government and Ms. Sania Nishtar, I don't think PMLN government should hesitate to give that credit wherever it is due. No harm in same with the Sehat cards. Of course, the PMLN government had also started it on a much smaller scale, but then PTI expanded it much further. And then again, that also awaits a third-party evaluations, because there are some questions about that too. But I think the biggest one is probably the billion tree. I don't know if a billion trees got planted, but whatever got planted has been globally recognized, and that's one area where
most of these projects might not be brick and mortar projects, but the housing scheme of the previous government was essentially brick and mortar. Do you think that it will become Nayi Roshni houses and schools, or it is going to be something else now?
Well, that was a very controversial scheme, especially with, the Lahore Ravi plant, because, to make the construction sector your main focus of growth. With PMLN, it was CPAC. Which is all about infrastructure, power plants, economic zones. So that's a more coherent strategy, even if it did not get implemented properly. But to switch from that to the construction sector, I think that was extremely irresponsible, because when you focus on the construction sector without growth in the industrial sector as well, then you develop bubbles. That's what the 1998 Asian crisis was in Thailand. That huge number of construction projects, apartments, etc., were built, office space, with no industrial expansion,
right.
and ultimately they had to pay for
We're
that.
almost out of time. Thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the debate
Thank
and talking to us at length with regards to the new government and its challenges, because this, of course, is a major issue that still remains, and there's so much that we still want to be seen for the progress of Pakistan. There's much to be done, and we hope that the consensus that the Prime Minister-elect was talking about in the united stance that is needed prevails and continues, and actually the issues that are being faced by the common man do get resolved, especially on the economic front as well. We'll be here to talk about more issues and more news as the situation evolves. Thank you so much for watching the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.